Hey everybody, this is Kevin. Social media was abuzz yesterday with Martin Luther King being in Fortnite, so I'm gonna check it out. I was reading they have this March Through Time exhibit where you go to Washington, D.C. in 1963 and hear Martin Luther King's speech, so reactions were very mixed about it. I think most of the people who were reacting didn't experience it, so hopefully I can see what this is all about, and hopefully it's a good thing. My computer fans are humming. Hopefully my microphone's not picking that up. This is one of the more interesting features, I think, Fortnite's doing. I'm going to find my ears and fit my headset before I get Alright, that's better. Looks like we're all thrown into a lobby. Looks like a movie theater. Until you can read things. Looks like there's a challenge you can do, so it's interactive. This is promoted by Time Magazine, so I hope they did a good job.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity.
I'm listening
100
to
years
this.
later,
It feels really speak over
the Negro is still languished in the corners
just a
of
recording.
American society, finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful
You can't
condition.
actually go inside the Lincoln Memorial.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
This is actually I've never actually heard this whole speech.
But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America till the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people, For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny.
Alright, so if my high school history teacher, Miss Percy, is watching this, we got all of those right.
They have come
Oh,
to
wait,
realize
there's more.
that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead.
Oh, that's cool. Once you get
We
it right,
cannot turn back.
teleport you somewhere.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the city. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution, staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend,
It's cool that you're between the Washington monuments.
so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. That one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when it happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
All right, that was the speech. It looks like there's a little museum here in the middle. Even though it's on the map, I guess I didn't notice it until right at the end. I'm gonna go through this. It's cool how you can interact with stuff and like see things, like the girl that went to the school in 1960, and then the freedom rides, but I don't know. I'm going to keep going through this before I form an opinion. All right, I like how it's interactive, but at the same time, it I don't know. I'm an adult. I'm about 40 almost. And all these pictures, all these things I've learned about in life. And I grew up in the Deep South, so the Civil Rights Act and the movement was something that was taught to us, because outside of Atlanta, growing up there, um, very familiar with Martin Luther King, and every year we would see on the news, on King Day, we would have a parade in my hometown, and you would see on the news, the local news stations out of Atlanta. There would always be gatherings at Ebenezer Baptist Church. And it, yeah, it's something we've always been taught and learned about, in context. And unfortunately, I was very lucky to have a good history teacher when I was in school. So, that being said, though, this right here, I don't know, I can see why some people were up in arms about this, but also I kind of like it because it is informative. They don't really. I hate how you have to play mini games. I wish you could just go through. Like, I like that it's interactive, but at the same time, you need 4 players. So if you want to just experience this by yourself without some kind of coordination, it might be tough to get all these done and see all the pieces of it. Like, there's one that took 4 people. But, my kid, he just started pre-K. I don't know how he's going to learn all this. I'd like to imagine that I'd like to imagine that he eventually will, through school or whatever. And I don't know what this is. This, like, on ice. But, I don't know, hopefully, I don't know, I hope people can learn from this. It's good. Some of the responses on the internet were people kind of losing their minds, thinking that, like, I don't know, I saw one person say that everyone is racist and no one's ever going to learn from this, and I don't believe that. I guess this is a 2-player challenge. But, I don't know. Yeah, my kid, he just started pre-K, so maybe he'll, like, I don't know. I don't know what they're teaching kids in school these days. Also, I don't live in the Deep South anymore, so I don't know what the impact is or the context will be, because I grew up, the high school I went to was built in the 90s. And it was built a few miles away from the original high school that used to be one of the segregated schools. And there was even though my school was built like 30 years after that one, you could see in the architecture and the size and the layout of everything how different it was. And a lot of the buildings in my hometown were very old, pre-civil rights. So I do remember seeing these bathrooms and buildings that were kind of smaller and out of the way, and water fountains. I haven't seen anything here that kind of gives context to that, about, like, we did see that one picture that saw separate but not equal. Let's go back to the museum part. So me being a person who grew up and saw the aftermath of that, I wasn't alive during that, but I did know people. Actually, was an old man who taught me a lot in life. He was a black man who did grow up during that. He was born in 1930. He never sounded bitter or anything about it, but it was something that he grew up during. There's desegregation over here. I thought I saw a picture. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I don't know what the context would be if a kid were to see this today. Would they understand everything fully? This is a nice introduction, but I don't think it fleshes it out very well. But I'm also looking at this through the eyes of a 40-year-old man who knows the context. So I don't know. I think this was a good introduction to it. Not a fan of the mini games. I kind of wish it was more laid out like a museum. Maybe the interactivity could have been a little different, but I think I see what they were going for. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Maybe you get some context and you don't actually have to play Fortnite if you don't want to. The history exhibit, I did like that. The little quiz. They weren't difficult questions, but if you weren't familiar with any of this, I could see why you wouldn't. I could see where people would learn something from it. Kind of wish it was more of that. Not a fan of the jumping puzzles, but at the end you get to see a little exhibit. Unfortunately, you need a team for most of these, so... and it looks like everybody just jumped out after the speech was over, so... I hope people aren't just jumping in here. It says you get a prize if you stay in for the whole thing. I'm glad you can't dance like people could dance. It looks like it gives you emotes for the whole thing. But I guess I could see why somebody didn't like the idea that you could emote while you're dressed as these various characters. Oh, it plays the music. Yeah, like during the speech, if somebody had started playing Gangnam Style, I would probably... maybe they should have turned that off, but I could see why some people would think that's a little tasteless, or... And I'm wandering through this as Deadpool. So, anyways, that's that. Hope you enjoyed this. I didn't go through all the challenges. There's probably more stuff to see in the little exhibits, but thanks everybody.